Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to do a tear down and repair of these popular GE ZW4005 Z-Wave switches by Jasco. And before we get started on the repair, I do want to mention that Jasco has put in place a extended warranty program on these switches. So you may not have to go to the trouble of this repair. So they have extended the warranty out to a 5-year period, and you can call the toll-free number. I'll put that on the screen, and they'll ask you to send them some pictures of the switch. And basically, as long as you have a receipt that was showed proof of purchase within the last 5 years, they will send you a new switch. If you don't have the receipt, then they will go by this little tag here on the switch itself. This represents the first 2 digits represent the year the switch was manufactured, and the second 2 represent the week. So if this sticker shows the switch is less than 5 years old, they will also replace it free of charge. Obviously, this switch is well outside the 5-year mark at this point in time. So the problem these switches have is typically after some sort of a power outage, maybe just from turn the breaker off to work on a circuit in the house, or just a power outage from a storm, the switch will stop working. And typically the telltale sign of this failure is that you'll either hear the switch clicking, hear a little relay inside clicking, or the little status light will be blinking. In some cases, I've even seen it fire up long enough to have the lights that are on that circuit come on and flash off. So you come into a room, the lights are flashing on and off and on and off. So if your switch is doing any of those things, then there's a good chance that you can repair yours using this guide. So I have quite a few of these switches in our house. We've got about 40 switches in the house, and this problem seems to affect the first generation of these switches. I haven't seen any of the later models fail like this. And so I've got a pile of these failed ones now. And so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and I've got a little rig set up where I can test the switch and make sure that this indeed has the problem that we think it has. And I can show you the problem real quick. So obviously you want to be very careful working with high voltage coming out of the wall. So make sure you take all the precautions and know what you're doing. This is a little cord I put together. Just makes it real easy to plug one of these switches in and test it. And of course, when you're doing this, you want to be careful not to touch the sides where the lugs are, because they will be live in a moment. And of course, the first one I grab is not exhibiting the symptoms, so let me try to grab a different one. All right, so here's a different switch that's actually exhibiting this one of the symptoms, which is flashing light. I'll see if I can show you what I'm talking about. Let me turn this light off. And so you can see the little status light is just flashing, and sometimes that'll be accompanied by a clicking noise. All right, let's go ahead and tear this switch down. So first, we're going to want to pry this faceplate off. There's four little clips around the sides. And next, there are 4 Phillips screws on these corners. And next we'll need to dig out this little antenna and just straighten that up like that. And next we want to pull the metal plate straight off. And now it's very important to keep this upright, and that'll make more sense in a minute as you're separating two halves. You may have this little sticker still on the side that makes it hard to get these halves apart, so peel that back a little bit. But you do want to keep this back flat on the ground and pull straight up. And the reason you want to do it like that is to keep all these lugs from going everywhere. It's not the end of the world if they do, it just makes yourself a lot more work. All right, so now's the tricky part. We need to extract these PCBs out of the enclosure here. There are two PCBs stacked upon one another, and there are little clips on either side. So I find it helpful to put a small screwdriver in one side and pry out like this. And some of these pop right out, and some of them are just a pain. And of course, the one I decide to film is going to be a pain. That side's starting to come out. There it goes. And don't forget about the antenna here, and then carefully remove that half. And so you can see there's two PCBs, and they are connected by a little 6-pin connector that's soldered on both sides. If it wasn't for this being soldered, this would be a much easier job. And of course you want to be careful when you're pulling it out too, that you're not putting too much strain. Let me get a close-up real quick. So you can see that this connector kind of is on its own little area of the board that sticks out. And so, you know, when you're prying those out, this side doesn't have anything to keep it from doing this. So you've got to be sure that you're not putting too much pressure on this, otherwise you run the risk of damaging the board on one of these sides. So one of the boards is primarily dedicated to the high voltage power coming in, and this board has the component that has likely failed. So this teeny tiny capacitor here is typically the failure point. I will put the specs of that up on the screen right now, and I'll put a link to some that I purchased on Amazon, but any with the same specs should work just fine. If your switch is not exhibiting the symptoms of the flashing light or the clicking noise, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is not the failure point, but it could mean something else has failed, and you may go through the trouble of replacing this and it doesn't help. Most of mine have all failed the same way. I did have one that didn't have the symptom that I replaced this capacitor on, and it did not bring it back to life. And so here is the other board, and this board seems to be responsible for probably if I had to guess, the Z-Wave radios and just all the low voltage stuff. So let me get this over to my other bench so we can separate these two halves and put the new capacitor in. All right, so I have the boards here in my vise. Just one of the boards is actually clamped down, the other one is hanging free. I do recommend that you clamp down the low voltage board and have the high voltage board up on top, because this side of the connector doesn't have any small components near it, so you don't have to worry as much about damaging something. I have learned that you just about have to have a hot air station to pull this apart. Maybe somebody that's better at soldering could get it apart, but the traces on these are very fragile, so you do have to work slowly and carefully. All right, so what I'm going to do first is flow a little bit of fresh solder on these joints, as they tend to be kind of dry and fragile. And now we will carefully heat this up and separate the two boards. So next I'm going to put the board in like this, so I can kind of have both hands to work on both sides of the board. I'm going to reach in here and grab that capacitor. And just like that it comes out. Line up the replacement. And I'm going to apply some fresh solder. Just add a little flux. And next I'm going to clean up these holes a little bit to make it easier to join the two halves back together. Alright, now that we have those holes cleaned up, slide that back on there and get some fresh solder. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so we're ready to reassemble, which is basically the reverse of what we did earlier. So, one good thing about this annoying antenna is it does make it easy to know which way things go, so you just look for the little hole right there. And this can be tricky to slide back in here. Not as tricky as it is to get out. Kind of hear it click in place. Alright, and do make sure that this little lens for your light hasn't popped out at some point. It just lifts in and out, so make sure before you put it back together that is in place. And now we're going to want to just drop this down. It makes it easier if you push the lugs kind of inward. Alright. And this plate here has the grounding lug, which can come out. So make sure it's back in place. Add the screws back. slide this antenna back into the little groove that's built into the switch. And then we're going to line up our faceplate. Make sure it clicks in all four corners. And also make sure this little air gap switch, make sure it's pushed all the way down. Otherwise you're going to think it's not working. And let's test it. All right, and I'm not sure if you can tell. Let's see if we can zoom in here. And a little blue light is solid on now. And we can turn the switch off, or turn it on and off. And it is now functioning again. So if you are going to be redeploying this, if you just pulled it out of the wall and then you're going to put it right back in, you should be ready to go. It should still have all of its settings and it should still be linked to your hub of choice. But if you're like me and you kind of rotate these things, I've got so many that I've got a little stockpile for when one goes out, where I don't have to worry about getting a hold of one or fixing one. So if you're like me and you're going to put it back in stock, now's a good time to go ahead and get the switch reset and test it. So because since the switch was totally dead, I just removed it from, in this case I use SmartThings, so I just force removed it. So it's probably in a state right now where it still is looking for a hub or thinks it's connected to a hub. And so the way to reset these switches, as far as I know, is when it's in the on position, you press the up button or the on button 10 times rapidly. And that should reset it. There doesn't seem to be any indication that that has occurred, but that's what some documentation online I found stated. So on the manual that they have online, it says to do it, I think 3 times up and 3 times down real quick, and this light will flash a few times to confirm, but I never saw that happen. And then what I like to do is go ahead and add it back into SmartThings just to make sure it's working, and then that way I can properly remove it so that I know it's reset and ready for my next use. So I'm just going to go in here and add this switch. Sometimes these, there it goes. I say sometimes they can be a little finicky. And then I always like to test it, make sure it's working from the app. And I can hear it clicking on and off. And then I'll go in here and properly remove it. That way I know for sure it's reset and ready for me to use next time. And there we go. Now this switch can go back into stock and it's ready for when the next one should fail. And like I said earlier, the good news is so far I have not had any of the newer generation switches fail, so hopefully they have improved the quality components they're using. And overall, except for this issue, I really do like these switches. But that about does it for this video, and thank you for watching, and I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll catch you next time.